No one truly knew Edward Lancaster. He was a shadowy billionaire, master of empires that spanned from tech to global logistics. At 76, with no children and long vanished from the public eye, Edward reappeared with a shocking video announcement. He would not leave his fortune to charities or distant relatives. Instead, he would search for a woman worthy of inheriting not his money, but his values. "My heiress will be the one who proves she possesses what money cannot buy," he declared solemnly, staring into the camera. That single phrase sent shockwaves across the nation. A test would begin in 7 days, and the world would be watching. The media exploded. Billionaire's secret test to find an heiress was on every screen. 12 women were selected mysteriously. Some were celebrities, others high-profile lawyers or socialites. None of them knew exactly why they were chosen, but all believed they deserved the crown. They came for power, for fame, for fortune. Behind each smile hid a motive, and behind Edward's quiet eyes, a plan none of them could imagine. The world expected a lavish competition, but this was no game. It was a trial of the soul. No rules, no clear guidelines. Each invitation simply read, "You've been chosen to prove your future." With the note came a golden passport marked EL and a date. Panic set in. How do you prepare for the unknown? Some women hired image consultants. Others dug deep into Edward's history, trying to anticipate his values, but none realized. It wasn't about manipulation. It was about something far rarer, sincerity. The kind of trait you can't fake no matter how expensive your dress is. The test would take place at Edward's secluded Victorian mansion, hidden atop a misty hill. Luxury cars began arriving. Inside them, confident women dressed to conquer. There were no smiles, only veiled threats behind polite greetings. It was clear, no friendships here, only rivals. The mansion echoed with old money and quiet judgment. The air thickened with unspoken hostility. The test hadn't started, but the war already had. The night before the challenge began, an eerie calm settled over the estate. Each woman was given a key with a mysterious word: destiny, ambition, loyalty, deceit. No one knew what it meant. No one dared ask. The mansion's walls whispered secrets only time could hear, but as night deepened, the back door creaked open. A shadow slipped inside unnoticed. It wasn't part of the plan, and yet it would change everything. There was something disturbingly enchanting about the procession of women entering Lancaster Manor. Each one seemed scripted, flawless attire, expensive perfumes, eyes trained to analyze and dominate. The first to arrive was Camilla Davanti, an international business mogul known as much for her beauty as her ruthless ambition. She didn't smile, she measured. Close behind came Isabelle Montreux, a European film actress whose charm barely covered the scandals trailing her past. She waved like a red carpet queen, but her eyes betrayed the panic of someone who refused to lose. One by one they appeared, each woman bringing the scent of venom masked by elegance. But it wasn't just the glamour that stood out. It was the silent tension that took root before anything had even begun. They glanced at each other like predators, trapped in limited terrain, knowing only one would be crowned. Rivalry was quiet, but lethal. Looks cut deeper than knives, compliments carried poison, and every smile felt like a calculated threat. The manor, soaked in ancient echoes, seemed to watch everything with eerie satisfaction, as if it already knew how this tale would end. None of them were innocent. Each carried secrets, moral debts, and hidden agendas. One claimed to be the illegitimate daughter of Edward's former business partner. Another, a celebrity psychologist, had built her fame on manipulation. There was even one who whispered rumors of once being Edward's lover, unproven but dangerously believable. Reputations could be stripped like silk, and the smallest slip could be weaponized. This wasn't a competition. It was a battleground where cunning outweighed any resume. The dinners were silent battles. Plates of exquisite food and rare wine couldn't drown out the thick silence. Politeness was a mask, trust a myth. Every gesture carried intent. Every word could be a trap. Somewhere in the shadows, perhaps Edward was already watching, recording, calculating. No one knew what the test would be. That mystery itself was the poison, slow, corrosive, and ever-present. By morning, a list of the selected candidates was nailed to the manor's main door. It was official: 12 women, 1 legacy. All other doors were locked, save the main halls and private chambers. The house had become something else, alive, and for these women, there was no way back. From that moment on, every breath, every reaction, every whispered insult or forced kindness could tip the scales. Helena Costa, a retired judge, was the first to feel it. As she passed a hallway, she saw a freshly painted portrait of herself, framed by strange symbols. This wasn't a contest, it was a trial, and they were not being judged by a jury, but by a man who had been betrayed too many times. It was exactly 8 a.m. when the manor's grand front gate slammed shut with a metallic clang. The 12 candidates sat in the main hall, perfectly arranged like chess pieces before battle. The silence was ceremonial, almost sacred. The butler, stiff as a statue, simply announced, "Mr. Lancaster watches from afar. The first phase begins today. You are to wait for instructions." Then, without another word, he left, leaving behind a void thick with expectation. But just then, as the tension reached its peak, a soft knock echoed from the manor's side entrance, a subtle sound, barely noticeable, if not for its timing. The door opened, and every eye turned. There, in the frame, stood the maid. She wore a simple uniform, hair tied in a rushed bun, hands still stained with soap. Her name was Maria, 28 years old, from the countryside, with eyes that spoke more than her lips ever would. She had been hired recently to help with cleaning before the event, and never imagined she'd cross paths with the candidates, let alone become one. "Sorry, I just came to get some cloths I left here yesterday," she whispered, trying not to interrupt. But the silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Camilla chuckled with disdain. Isabel glanced at her with a mocking smirk. Helena raised an eyebrow. To these women, her presence was not just inappropriate, it was insulting. But what none of them expected was the butler's next words. "Mr. Lancaster wishes for you to remain. He has been watching you." The room froze. The women exchanged glances, confused, insulted. "Is this a joke?" one hissed. "She's the maid. She doesn't belong here." But no one dared speak too loudly. Edward Lancaster's will was law. Maria looked down, ashamed. "I think there's been a mistake. I'm just here to clean." The butler's response was calm and final. "The house is clean. Now we'll see whose soul isn't." Maria was led to an empty chair and sat there, trembling. The others looked at her like she didn't belong. But something had shifted. The balance had been broken. The invisible piece was now in play. Maria kept her head down, trying to be as invisible as possible. She knew every movement would be judged more harshly than any of the others. Surrounded by elegance, she had nothing to offer except authenticity, and that, strangely, was more dangerous than anything the others had. She didn't wear a mask, didn't perform. She simply was. That raw presence unsettled them. Snide remarks disguised as humor began to circulate, whispered insults, sharp glances. But Maria never reacted. Not out of weakness, out of strength. Her silence was more unsettling than any confrontation. It was like her presence alone began unraveling their facade. When the butler returned with the first instructions, he looked at Maria and said, "You'll receive one too." The tension spiked. This wasn't a minor exception. It was a direct threat to the power play the women thought they controlled. Camilla stood. "With all due respect, this is completely outside the rules." The butler replied without flinching, "Mr. Lancaster made the rules and he chose to change them." Silence again. Maria took the envelope with trembling hands. She had no idea why she had been pulled into this, but there was no turning back. Somehow she had been chosen, and though she didn't know the reason, she already sensed that something deep within her was about to be tested. For years, Edward Lancaster's name was synonymous with success. He graced the covers of magazines as a business genius, a rare but generous philanthropist, and a strategist who never lost. But behind every achievement lay hidden wounds, deep scars that never made it into interviews or glossy photos. In his youth, Edward built his empire with the help of his two older brothers, Thomas and Richard. They were close at first, but when the first wave of wealth arrived, betrayal came with it. Thomas embezzled millions and vanished, leaving Edward with unpaid debts and broken contracts. Richard, the quieter brother, took over for a short time, only to be caught selling trade secrets to rivals. It was Edward who reported him, sending the last of his family to prison. That betrayal was his first lesson. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and names don't make someone worthy. Disillusioned, Edward withdrew from the world. For nearly 2 decades, he lived surrounded by lawyers and bodyguards. No family, no attachments. He believed everyone had a price, and the prettier the smile, the deeper the stab. He became a silent observer, studying people, memorizing their behaviors. He recorded every meeting, kept every letter, archived every contract. Words meant nothing, only actions did. Most of all, he realized his biggest mistake was trusting those who shared his name. Blood taught him caution, betrayal taught him strategy, and isolation taught him to plan. In one of his rare personal journals, discovered only after his full retreat from public life, Edward wrote, "Trust is a gem buried in the swamp. To find it, you must get dirty, but to clean it, that takes courage." These words revealed a man wearied by the world but not defeated. Quietly, he began preparing what he called his final human experiment. He didn't just want to transfer wealth. He wanted to see with his own eyes whether someone still existed in this world who deserved it, not by bloodline, not by ambition, but by essence. That's how the test was born. A game not of appearances, but of soul. Every detail was carefully orchestrated. The women chosen, the cryptic words on the keys, the monitored halls, the staff acting as his eyes. The mansion itself was a moral trap, not to test talent, but values. The cruelest part was that the test had begun long before the women arrived. Some had been watched for months, others years, through discreet channels, silent investigations, and hidden cameras. Edward didn't want to be fooled again. He knew who had lied to climb a corporate ladder, who used charity as a front for fraud, who destroyed others through media slander. He knew secrets even they didn't admit to themselves. Yet, he invited them anyway, not to crown a queen, but to watch masks fall. The real spectacle for him was never the selection. It was the unraveling. As the candidates settled into the manor, Edward watched from a dark room through a network of hidden cameras. His gaze was not admiration, but mourning. He saw in them the same faces that had once smiled at him, only to betray him. But something about Maria had caught his eye days before the event began. While cleaning the garden, she found an old photo on the ground. She paused, dusted it off, and gently placed it back on the wall, unaware it was a portrait of Edward's mother. No camera, no audience, just quiet integrity. And when she stepped into that hall, uninvited, awkward and real, he knew, maybe, someone worthy still existed. The next morning, the halls of the mansion felt colder, as if the air itself had grown heavier. Maria, now officially part of the selection group, moved quietly through the corridors, still unsure why she had been included. While the others strutted in designer heels and confidence, she felt like a typo in a luxury invitation. The contrast was brutal, silk dresses flowing, designer perfumes in the air, and Maria in a plain borrowed dress from the kitchen staff. No makeup, no rehearsed elegance. Her hands bore the marks of a life of labor. Her mere presence was enough to ignite disdain. Isabel was the first to make it clear, glancing at her with unveiled disgust. "Someone forgot to tell the cleaning crew we're done," she said loudly, earning snickers from Camilla and two others. The insults started subtly, socially acceptable jabs, remarks about the smell of bleach in the air, or how some people don't know table etiquette. Each line coated in sarcasm, sharp as knives. Maria pretended not to hear. She always sat in the corner, avoided eye contact, stayed out of the conversations. But even her silence was offensive to them. Her existence challenged everything they had built their pride on. Helena, the retired judge, whispered to another, "She may mean well, but this isn't a charity case. Mr. Lancaster is testing our patience." Maria's presence wasn't just unwanted, it was threatening. The emotional pressure escalated. During one meal, she was deliberately left without cutlery. At another, someone replaced her water with vinegar, provoking suppressed laughter as she quietly coughed. No one openly told her to leave, but the message was constant and cruel. One night, returning to her room, Maria found her small suitcase turned inside out. Her clothes were crumpled, and a note lay on her bed. "Go back where you belong." No signature, but the message was clear. It wasn't just one woman against her. It was the entire system. The idea of deserving was being twisted around her, and she was living the consequences. But Maria didn't break. There was something in her posture that wasn't submission, but quiet resistance. She knew better than to respond with anger. Not in this house. The game here wasn't just about winning. It was about demeaning, and she refused to play it. Instead, she rose each morning at the same time, made her bed with care, offered help to staff when needed, and sat at the table with silent dignity. Her simplicity became her strength, her calm, her shield, and Edward saw everything. In every small overlooked gesture, he saw strength of character. Every time she looked down without lowering her spirit, he saw courage. What others mistook for weakness, he recognized as integrity. The peak of the humiliation came in a moment, disguised as harmless. One candidate proposed a group activity. Each woman would say what made her worthy of inheritance. When it was Maria's turn, silence fell. I don't know if I'm worthy, she said softly, but I've never had to step on anyone to earn what I have. Maybe that means something. Suppressed laughter followed. Touching, Camilla mocked. Next? But in the dark viewing room, Edward didn't laugh. For the first time in years, he smiled, faint, almost invisible, but real, because humiliating someone is easy. What matters is who stands tall after. And Maria, she hadn't bowed. That, more than any speech, weighed more than any fortune. On the morning of the fourth day, the tower clock rang louder than usual. The candidates were summoned to the manor's garden, where they found wooden tables, old tools, and scattered materials. No one knew what to expect. There was tension in the air, but also confusion. The butler appeared once more as rigid and solemn as ever. Today's trial is practical, he announced. You must repair a broken garden bench using only the materials provided. The one who restores its function most effectively will be declared the winner of this round. Reactions varied. Some laughed, others protested. Are you serious? Camilla scoffed, fixing furniture. The butler replied, Nothing reveals character like how one treats what they consider beneath them. The challenge began. The socialites and public figures were lost. Most didn't know where to start. Some didn't even touch the tools. Isabel held a hammer just to look busy, posing for whoever might be watching. Camilla tried to delegate the task to a gardener, a move that was immediately shut down. A few tried and failed, mismeasuring, splitting wood, or giving up quickly. The scene turned tense and awkward. Their pride outweighed their willingness to engage in anything beneath them. Meanwhile, Maria quietly grabbed a cloth, cleaned the bench, studied the joints, and got to work. Her movements were steady, careful. She was used to fixing broken things, including her own life. The difference between Maria and the others was stark. While they focused on appearing competent, she focused on solving the problem. She didn't seek approval, didn't glance sideways. As others pretended to get their hands dirty, she had already found the right piece of wood, applied glue, reinforced the backrest, and used a forgotten clamp to secure it. No rush, no hesitation. Each step was practical. She didn't treat the task as a symbol, just as a task. When she finished, she didn't smile. She simply wiped her hands, breathed deeply, and stepped back. The bench was solid, simple but usable. Around her, others faked pride, hid frustration, or acted like the trial meant nothing. The butler inspected each bench. The first few were unstable, poorly done, one not touched at all. Appearances often hide uselessness, he said coldly. When he reached Maria's, he pressed the backrest, sat briefly and gave a small nod. Functional, and done alone. Well done. That was all it took. Silence fell. Once again, Maria, without trying, exposed the other's weakness. This time their disdain had shifted. No longer mockery, but fear masked in arrogance. Even without knowing how to play their game, Maria was winning. And worst of all, she wasn't even trying. Edward, watching from the dark, noted every reaction. Because the trial wasn't about benches, it was about masks. That night, during dinner, no one dared mock Maria anymore. Conversations were cold, full of subtext. Her name was whispered, no longer as a joke, but as a growing threat. Some began forming quiet alliances, plotting ways to restore order. Maria's success wasn't just a fluke, it was a challenge to the system. In his dark viewing room, Edward replayed the trial recordings frame by frame. He wasn't analyzing woodwork. He watched glances, whispers, manipulation attempts. He didn't care who was best with tools. He cared who revealed their true self under pressure. And that day, Maria proved she could fix what was broken, without breaking others in the process. Tension hung thick in the manor. Every glance carried an unspoken truth, and the forced smiles could no longer mask the true intentions. After the first trial, alliances became more visible. Camilla, Isabel, and two others quietly joined forces, united in their disdain for Maria. They never said it out loud, but whispered conversations in shadowy corridors and quiet exchanges over dinner revealed a plan taking shape. Their goal was simple: find something, anything, to bring Maria down. But what they didn't expect was that in trying to destroy her, they would unearth their own secrets, dark ones. In the mansion's old library, Maria discovered a leather-bound notebook tucked behind dusty tomes. It didn't belong to the staff, nor to her. Inside, she found handwritten entries detailing calls, secret meetings, and even bribes. They weren't Edward's notes. They seemed to belong to a former assistant who had kept records for years. There were names, dates, and damning information about some of the current candidates. One woman had siphoned funds from a fake charity. Another had sabotaged a colleague's career through planted false accusations. Maria closed the book, heart racing. These weren't rumors. They were facts, and worse, Edward already knew. Meanwhile, one of the staff, working for Camilla, searched through Maria's belongings, hoping to find something scandalous, but there was nothing. No secret letters, no skeletons. Maria was clean, and that, ironically, made her more dangerous. Because while others had built empires of lies, she had nothing to hide. With no dirt to uncover, the group pivoted. They began spreading rumors, subtle, sharp, that Maria had gained Edward's favor through other means. Whispers became insinuations. The air turned toxic, jealousy masked as judgment. No one questioned the lies. They simply accepted them. But the game flipped again when, just past midnight, an envelope appeared at the manor's main office. Inside were copies of pages from the notebook Maria had found. The names were marked in red, and a single note read, "The truth begins to move." No signature, no clue, but the message was clear. Someone else was playing, and it wasn't Edward. When the candidates caught wind of the contents, panic set in. One woman tried to leave, claiming illness. She was denied. The rule was clear: if you left, you were out. The glamour faded. Now, there wasn't just rivalry. There was fear. Real, palpable fear. In his dark viewing room, Edward read the pages in silence. He wasn't surprised. "I warned them. Masks don't last forever," he said softly. But there was one detail. Edward hadn't placed the notebook where Maria found it. Someone else did. Someone was moving inside his game. Maria, instead of weaponizing the content, handed it over to the butler. She didn't use it for gain. She chose not to destroy. That choice spoke volumes. While the others acted from pride, Maria acted from principle. What she didn't yet realize was that she was no longer just a candidate. She was the center of the fire, and the brighter her integrity shone, the more dangerous she became to those who lived in darkness. What once looked like a graceful competition, wrapped in subtlety and charm, had turned into a battlefield of tense stares, rushed footsteps, and cutting whispers. Since the discovery of the documents and the mysterious note, the manor's atmosphere had shifted. Maria's presence, once a source of mockery, had become a mirror, a reminder of everything the others were pretending to be. She didn't need to expose anyone. Her integrity alone stood as a threat. Camilla, once composed, now stumbled over her words. Isabel, once magnetic, avoided eye contact as if even a glance might reveal her truth. Their alliances began to crumble. The silent pact between the powerful started to rot from within. The logic was simple. If Maria couldn't be brought down, at least she should be isolated. Fear triggered survival instincts. One misty morning, a candidate found her name scrawled across a bathroom mirror, followed by the word imposter. Paranoia spread. Even the mansion's staff were viewed with suspicion. "She's turning the servants against us," one whispered. The idea that a simple maid could become a threat to their dominance was absurd and terrifying. But what frightened them most was the possibility that Maria wasn't playing the game at all, and yet she was winning. Fear mutated into rage. During a minor dispute, one woman lashed out, accusing Maria of manipulation, of weaponizing her humility. The scene was tense. Maria didn't argue. She listened, quietly, and her silence said more than any defense could. She wasn't there to fight them, and that terrified them. In the hallways, they avoided her, not out of disdain but out of fear. They didn't know how to confront someone who refused to play by their rules. For the first time, they weren't facing a rival. They were facing their own conscience. In a desperate move, Isabel confronted the butler. "Why is she here? Who allowed that woman to interfere?" The butler answered coldly, "She wasn't placed. She was noticed." That word, noticed, echoed in Isabel's mind like a curse. While everyone else fought to be seen, Maria had been recognized simply by being herself. It defied everything their world believed in. Edward continued to observe, not for drama. He expected that. What interested him was how fear stripped away the performance. It was fear, not competition, that revealed true character, and he saw it now. Their deepest fear wasn't losing the inheritance. It was losing control of their carefully built image. The following night, the mansion sank into a tense silence. No music, no fake smiles. Wine glasses remained full in trembling hands. No toasts, no laughter. In the grand room, Maria sat by the fireplace, calmly reading from one of the old books. Serene. A few candidates watched her from afar, as if she were something haunting. Others locked themselves in their rooms, plotting. But one feeling had overtaken them all. Fear had swallowed vanity. Day after day, Maria rose without needing to strike. And to these women, used to winning by shouting the loudest, that was terrifying. Deep down, they all knew, whether they admitted it or not, that true power had come from where they least expected. The revelation came without warning. During breakfast, the butler entered the hall holding a black envelope. He said nothing. He simply handed it to the candidate seated at the center of the table, Camilla. All eyes turned. The thick, heavy paper felt more like a sentence than a message. Camilla read silently, her face drained of color. With trembling hands, she passed the envelope down. One by one, they read it. Edward Lancaster would make his final decision the next morning at 6 o'clock sharp. No more trials, no more games. The heiress would be named. Suddenly, time had turned into an enemy. And panic, a familiar guest at the table. The announcement detonated everything. The women, once strategic and composed, scattered like loose pieces on a board mid-flip. Some spent the night drafting emotional speeches, trying to charm the butler or faking last-minute humility. Others, in desperation, spread dangerous lies, suggesting that Maria had ties to Edward's criminal former associates. There was no proof, just poison. The manor, already thick with tension, now pulsed with fear. And Maria, as always, remained quiet. But this time, even in silence, she knew they would stop at nothing. That night, something happened that could have changed the entire game. Around 2 a.m., Isabel was caught sneaking into the kitchen wing, rummaging through drawers and cabinets. A staff member found her holding a file of documents. Startled, she dropped them and fled. The papers were gathered and given to the butler, who quietly handed them to Edward in the morning. Among them were old conduct reports, notes from former employees, security logs. Isabel's goal was simple: find dirt on Maria. But the result was the opposite. There was nothing to incriminate Maria, but plenty on Isabel, and it was too late to erase it. From that moment on, desperation ruled. Camilla lashed out at Isabel, blaming her for ruining their entire plan. Helena, colder than ever, withdrew completely, muttering, "Better to fall alone than be dragged down by fools." The alliance shattered. Each woman began to fend for herself. Some tried to redeem themselves by helping staff, smiling at Maria, desperate last-minute performances. Others crafted excuses for their likely loss, blaming bias, favoritism, or manipulation. But none of those excuses held up. The truth was clear. They had shown who they were, and it wasn't enough. Edward, watching from the highest room in the house, no longer evaluated. He simply observed who would fall with dignity and who would beg not to. On the final night before the decision, silence reigned. Dinner was served, but no one ate. Wine glasses remained full. Eyes, tired and hollow, no longer pretended to be strong. Maria, in her usual quiet corner, watched it all with calm. She didn't know if she would be chosen. There was no certainty. But she had something none of them did: peace. The peace of not having betrayed herself. At 5 a.m., the bell tower rang one last time. The sky was still dark, but morning was near. Each woman dressed as if for a coronation or a funeral. The decision was moments away. And by now, it was no longer about who deserved to win. It was about who was ready to face the truth. At exactly 6 a.m., the manor's bells rang. The deep chime echoed through the corridors like a sacred call. The 12 candidates were led into the main hall, now dimly lit by morning light and antique chandeliers. At the center, a tall back chair, empty. No one knew if Edward would appear in person. The butler entered, placed a tablet on a carved wooden stand, and pressed play. Edward Lancaster appeared on screen, seated in his office, wearing a dark suit, eyes firm, voice steady. "If you're watching this," he began, "it means the choice has already been made. There would be no ceremony, no appeal, just the truth, raw, final, irreversible. I spent most of my life surrounded by people with titles, smiles, and no substance, Edward said. When I set out to choose an heir, I wasn't looking for beauty, ambition, or staged intelligence. I was looking for values, for truth. His words cut through the air like blades. Some women shifted in their seats. Others sat rigid, still hoping for a miracle. Maria, in the back row, didn't move. Edward continued. I watched every one of you. Your gestures, your words, your silence. And I saw more than you think. I saw lies wrapped in charm, cruelty behind charisma, and I saw someone who endured humiliation without striking back, someone who never asked for anything, and therefore deserves everything. Then, the name, Maria da Silva. A collective gasp filled the room. Eyes widened, some closed in disbelief. Maria sat, frozen. It took her a moment to realize what she'd heard. She looked around, expecting someone to object, but silence confirmed it. Edward's voice returned. Maria will be my heir. The estate, the businesses, the assets, all will pass to her under guidance of my legal team. The video paused, then resumed with Edward looking directly into the camera. To those who thought they could deceive me, know this. I've been betrayed before, but I've learned. Now I simply watch and let the truth do the work. Camilla stood, shaking with rage. This is a joke. A maid? You're giving it all to a maid? The butler responded, not a maid, a woman of integrity, which is what Mr. Lancaster always sought. Isabel began to cry, hiding her face. Helena stood and walked out, saying nothing. The others sat stunned. Maria remained seated. No tears, no joy, just a deep breath, like someone who had held it in her whole life and now was finally free. It wasn't victory she felt, it was justice. What life had taken from her had returned, not as a gift but as payback. Sweet, quiet, undeniable. At the end of the video, Edward left one final message. Maybe you thought this was a game, a contest, but the truth is, the test began before you entered these doors. It began in how you treated others. It began when you assumed money could buy everything. He paused. Let this be a lesson. Life collects its debts, and when it does, it sends no warning. The screen went black. Lights returned. The butler approached Maria and handed her a sealed envelope. It's yours, signed and witnessed. Congratulations, Mrs. Lancaster. And for the first time, Maria smiled. Not because she won, but because she was finally seen. Sometimes, true heirs aren't the ones with the bloodline, but the ones with the soul. Justice may come slowly and quietly, but when it arrives, it never misses its target. Never underestimate those who live in the shadows. That's where the strongest roots grow. Did this story leave you speechless? Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Maria's place? Do you think justice was served, or do you see it differently? We want to hear your thoughts. The story doesn't end until you speak.